Welcome to the American Academy of Grief Counseling's Videogram on helping those in grief. And this video is going to look at how to help those who are suffering from a loss, support-wise, and also going through the various stages of helping an individual cope with a particular loss. We're going to look at a lot of do's and don'ts in particular. And that's where the first slide comes into play. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I think that's really an appropriate quote when it comes to trying to help the bereaved. Many want to help, but they really don't know how to help individuals. Many have good intentions in what they want to say, but when they do say it, it only makes it worse. And a few examples would be, for instance, telling an individual who maybe just lost a loved one, he's in a better place or she's in a better place. The famous, you'll get over it, you'll get through it, you're tough, and so forth. It's God's will. And this can really offset a reaction that is angry towards religion or one's faith, or even start an existential crisis itself. Other ones would include, you're tough, you can get through it. How do you know how they feel? They might feel very vulnerable at that moment, and assuming that they have to feel tough or be a man about it can actually cause problems in how they display their grief in the future. Another one that is detrimental is saying, well, I've been through this before. Well, it's true, you might have been through it, but you might not be experiencing the same things that they are. And it can even be worse if you can say, I've been through worse. It was a lot worse for me. So you should be grateful. This is not a good thing to say to someone, obviously, who is bereaved. And finally, I think another good one, not a good one, but really a bad one to say, is look on the bright side. There isn't much of a bright side at the moment when someone is experiencing a loss. So these are things that are good intentioned for the most part. You're trying to help someone feel better, but in reality, you're making them feel worse. So because of this, some will go to the opposite extreme and won't say anything at all because they're scared, or they'll avoid the bereaved because they feel awkward. They don't know how to broach the subject, so to speak. So the bereaved is left alone. And in reality, many of them would like to have someone come up and talk to them and tell them, oh, I'm very sorry about your loss. And that's one of the biggest things that you should do, is acknowledge the loss, acknowledge their feelings, and listen, instead of trying to give advice or act like you know what you're talking about when you really don't know what they're feeling or what they're experiencing. So what not to do? On the right side, avoid those types of sayings. Exactly. But also, don't try to fix. Grief cannot be fixed. The loss itself cannot be fixed. The only thing that is going to repair the loss is for that person to be giving back to that individual, for the incident not to have occurred. So you can't fix grief. Grief is part of life. It's part of the human experience. So loss is something that we all have to deal with and learn to adjust to. So trying to fix it with a few words, trying to fix it through some actions, and thinking that they're going to be better the next day, the next week, the next month, that's just not true. And it's something that if you're a grief counselor, especially, you need to understand that you're never going to fix it, but you can help alleviate the grief reaction. This next slide goes into what we call grief bullies. While we have many well-intentioned individuals, we also have some individuals that are not as well adjusted when it comes to loss. They have issues expressing their loss, and they have inherited many bad grieving habits themselves. So what do they try to do? Psychologically, they try to control other grieving patterns that are detrimental to their view of how one should grieve. They try to give grieving timeframes to individuals. It's okay, it's been a month. I don't want to hear any more about how mom died. I don't want to hear any more how grandma died. We're through with that now. We've gone through it. We're moving on. That's an example of a grief bully. Or a grief bully will come through and they'll dismiss and disenfranchise your grief. They'll say, well, you know what? It's not that big of a deal. It was only a dog. So this type of disenfranchisement is another example of someone belittling your grief or trying to control your grief or tell you how to feel regarding a particular loss in itself. So what we want to do as grief counselors, as family members, as friends, is sojourn in grief, to walk that path with the grieving individual, experiencing it with them by being there, by listening, and trying to be a person who understands and acknowledges their grief and gives help as needed in terms of coping strategies. Remember, and this is important, we can't fix grief because the loss can never be reversed. The road to healing is hence a very, very long road. And there is truly no grief recovery itself. There's an adjustment, but we never recover from the loss. And why would we want to? If we could recover, that would mean what we lost truly had no value to begin with. So as individuals go on this long road of grief and we sojourn with them side by side, we want to remember their grief. We don't want to simply vanish after the funeral. We want to help in meaningful ways. Maybe help with the laundry, maybe help with a particular dinner, send them food and so forth. To give them a call every now and then, I'm going to ask them, how are you doing? And of course, on the side, spiritually, if you're religious, pray. Pray for them. Pray for their adjustment to this loss, to this heavy burden, this heavy cross that has been placed upon their shoulders. So with grief support, we can help individuals identify losses and to better cope with them. Licensed counselors and even certified grief counselors and those in pastoral care can help individuals. Some individuals need this type of grief support. They need to go to someone to talk to. Maybe they don't have anyone in their inner circle that understands. So this is where a certified grief counselor or a professional licensed counselor comes into play, to emotionally listen, to give support. And again, to identify the issues underlying the loss and maybe discover some maladies that are existing within the grief process itself. Also, advice on how to cope with the loss and how to incorporate the loss into one's life, all the while educating the individual about the grief process itself. And this is the cornerstone of what grief support is. This is the cornerstone of what grief counseling is, helping an individual express their grief, helping them in a healthy fashion adjust to the loss and to be able to move into life again while still acknowledging that loss, but still living life itself. And that's the purpose of grief counseling. And some individuals need that help. Others naturally go on and they're able to go through the grieving process by themselves. But good grief support is sometimes necessary for certain individuals. If you'd like to learn more about the American Academy of Grief Counseling and our grief counseling certification program, you can do so. Our program is online, it's independent study and open to qualified professionals. By taking the required courses, it leads to a 4-year certification in grief counseling. The first link above takes you to our site itself and will give you more detailed information regarding our grief counseling program. If you would like to give our office a call, you can also do that at 330-652-7776. Again, that number is 330-652-7776, or you can email us at info@aihcp.org. Again, that's info@aihcp.org. So when we find our friends and family grieving, we try our best. We try our very best to help them through it, but sometimes our help can cause more problems than good. So it's important to educate yourself, to be a better individual in grief support itself. I'd like to thank you for listening and have a great day.